because of time. Well, that's all fun and interesting. But if we keep in mind the social nature of the socially constructed reality, and I mentioned the Peter Berger book. I highly recommend that. It's only about 190 pages, maybe a little more, and it is dense for that, but at the same time, if you read that, you have a really contemporary sense of how or what we mean by social contract theory, or not social contract, social construction. The idea that we have a reality that we perceive, of course, within forms of life that have language games associated with them that are all embedded in a larger narrative that explains how they're all interconnected, and that inside a still larger narrative that we might call a grand narrative or a meta-narrative that explains in our each individual consciousness the way the whole world works, right?
Does he elaborate on group consciousness and what do they call it in anthropology? Cultural exchange? Isn't that a model?
In Peter Berger's book, he here we go. Let's go Wikipedia here. And the book is really fascinating itself, and a short read actually, and oddly a lot more expensive than it was when I bought it. I bought it for like $1.95. Today I think the minimum price if you buy it new is like 10 something, but I'm sure that it's in the library, so I'm not sure why it's not already available online for free. It might be somewhere, but it explains how we go from a new concept becoming an objectification. How money is a perfect example of this socially constructed reality. Actually, I don't have any. I have no money. If what you mean by that is like a dollar bill, but I mean, it's not really valuable except for the social agreement that has value. So that I could literally take a worthless piece of paper to a store and give it to them, and they will give me a product in return for it. And they're not losing, because that piece of paper can then be exchanged with others who all in an agreement say that it has a certain value. Of course, when you're looking at economics, and you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with the BRICS meeting that's going on in Russia, because of the power, what we call the hegemony of the United States and the dollar, the world economy basically runs on the dollar. You can have an exchange rate and so on. It's kind of neat. But it also means that everything has to go through the filter of the dollar. So banks know who's spending what on what.
BRICS is trying to push.
And the United States knows what the banks know. So as a result, we know who's buying what, who's spending how many technological parts from India that are going to Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan all of a sudden has an incredible economy because they're selling so much stuff to Russia, which are clearly not being made in Kazakhstan. And yet that's important for all the weapons, the technological weapons that Russia is using in its war against Ukraine. I'm sorry, it's temporary military action, or whatever Putin wants to call it. Puruski, конечно. But BRICS is an attempt to break this hegemony of the dollar. And so you have BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And as like about 60 other countries have joined it, and so on. And they're all meeting right now in Russia, in a town in Kazakhstan, I think. I forget. But in any case, the funniest thing that I've read so far is that you have to bring cash. When you come to the conference, because of the exchange rates and everything, everybody's encouraged to bring cash, because otherwise you can't buy anything while you're there at the conference. Dollars, specifically dollars, which is hilarious, actually.
Especially if you're an economist.
So money, it's a social construct, but notice the power of it. You can't just burn up money and say it's not worth anything. You'll be arrested. The power of the society to enforce the objectified value of this fake object. It's psychological, but the psychological power of these social constructs, depending on the construct. Try getting a blessing. One of the neat things that Martin Luther protested against was in his day. He nailed his theses on the door, or the bulletin board, really, protesting the selling of indulgences. Because what the church was doing in order to make money to pay for the new building in the Vatican, Michelangelo was expensive, right? Not so much because of how much they were giving Michelangelo, but because of the cost of all the ingredients that were going into the building. So they were sending priests around to communities and convincing poor people that all of their ancestors were in hell, or purgatory, or whatever you want to call it. Yes, my granny used to call it purgatory.
Nice.
Personal favorite of mine. She was an interesting, one-toothed old crone. But in any case, she used that one tooth to break the bologna. She'd eat bologna slices. But yeah, they were convincing people that their parents were suffering for these little sins and things that they might have done. And everybody sins, It's the milk bottle thing, right? But they could buy their parents' way out of punishment by giving money, buying these indulgences, which were signed. Your parents, are out of jail, basically, And these poor people were scared to death for them, literally unable to feed their own children, and yet would spend whatever money they could get in order to try to rescue their parents from these hellacious places, And Martin Luther was absolutely horrified, and so because he's ministering to these people and trying to keep them, healthy and happy and living, and here comes these people from Italy selling this stuff, and really good. They had displays that would scare the crap out of people. How horrible things were for their parents, and so they were literally buying these. Well, this is a social objectified contract between the sellers who say your parents are getting out of this imaginary punishment, right? This is all virtual, the whole thing. And they were succeeding. They were selling to all these people that really couldn't afford it. Martin Luther succeeded in stopping that, which of course is what really precipitated the big crisis where they wanted to stop him, not only stop this monk, burn all of his books. It didn't work, by the way, because for one thing, they now had a printing press and people had hundreds, thousands of copies all over being spread. So the church suddenly discovered that they couldn't stop this. And basically that ended up stopping the selling of indulgences, right? Which meant that they had to figure out some other way of paying Michelangelo for the dome of St. Peter and Paul's. Well, if anything seems to be persistent through all of these, it seems to be logic. So let's at least look at this document, which I suggested you could certainly read it. My guess is, though, that it's dense for folks. It's the kind of thing where you have to learn the vocabulary or learn the patterns. So it's just, of course, what are we doing here? This is the IEP. Yes. And it's describing propositional logic, what it is. Various other names for it, right? And here's the table of contents. Notice it's long, right? And what is a statement? By the way, this is something all of these things we really have discussed a little bit, that the way logicians are talking about statements, they're different than the physical sentence. So I have a sentence, George W. Bush is the 43rd President of the United States. You might say, well, it's past tense, right? Etc. But that is a physical thing, actually. In the sense of, the books that publish this, they're thinking it's a physical thing, but of course when we're looking at it, it is a physical, is this physical? This is a light shining from that's digitized. Yes, I want to say it's physical because we're all looking at it, right? Isn't that fun? That's a fun problem right there. Is this physical? Well, I can see it. But a logician wants to say that the statement is the meaning. Okay, we've never figured out what's the meaning of meaning. But we're going to say that you could say this in French, German, Russian, whatever, and the meaning is the same. That's false, by the way. If you go from one language to another, we have an absolutely famous point made by Quine called the indeterminacy of translation. There's no official way of saying this is a correct translation. But in any case, what the logician wants to talk about is the meaning. The meaning is being communicated by this physical sentence, or if I'm uttering the sentence orally, we say that that's a physical thing because you heard it, right? It's physical vibrations through the air. So that's physical, but that's still not the meaning. The meaning is this virtual understanding of what that is supposed to mean, right? Paris is the capital of France. Everyone born on Monday has purple hair. By the way, the first two statements are considered true. The third one, it's got to be false, right? As far as I know. Here's one, and I just had to check. Is Ganymede a moon of Jupiter or Saturn? Jupiter. Everyone knows that. Not really. Some of us have to find out. In fact, some of us might not even know, is it a moon of either of those two places? What the hell is a moon? Do we know? Our moon has a moon right now.
Mhm.
Yes?
I don't know.
Yes.
Our moon.
What's that?
Moon is technically just a satellite of another body.
But we have a moon around our moon.
Mhm.
It's too small for you to